My name is Kelsang Ladrin, and I've been practicing with this tradition for 17 years. In 2001, I was living in Asheville, North Carolina, and happened to just walk into a bookstore one day, and there was a Buddhist monk giving a talk, bookstore talk, and I sat down just to hear, looked interesting, and started to, hear these teachings for the first time, and it really resonated. I felt like, wow, that just makes so much sense. And so from there, I've just gotten more and more into it. And 11 years ago, I got ordained as a Buddhist nun.
My name is Stephanie, and I went to my first class at a Kadampa meditation center almost 9 years ago. I was invited there by a friend of mine and coworker who'd been a practitioner for several years, and he invited me just to a drop-in class, casual class on a Wednesday night, and I went to the class kind of not knowing what to expect, but having an interest in learning more about Buddhism and certainly in learning more about meditation. So I went, checked it out, and it just really resonated with me. And I've been going to classes ever since and practicing ever since. And that was in 2010, so about 9 years now.
My name's Maureen Kilkenny, and I started coming to the center about 5 years ago, a little over 5 years ago. And I was just going through a really difficult time in my life and had tried many different religions. I really studied lots. I grew up Catholic. I went to Unitarian Church. I went to Unity Church, religious science, not Scientology, but just about everything, looking for something that really fit. And nothing was quite right. And then I was going through this difficult time, and I realized that the one thing that did help me throughout all these experiences was meditation. That was like the one key thing, the theme that ran through that really meant something to me and really helped me. And so I went online to look for meditation center, and I found Kadampa Meditation Center, and I've been coming ever since.
Yeah, so our statues, they serve a lot of different purposes. One, kind of just in general, a focus of our faith. So as Buddhists, it's actually, I mentioned the refuge commitments. One of our commitments of refuge is anytime we see an image of Buddha, we regard that as an actual Buddha. And in doing that, it's like actively bringing enlightened energy into our life, into the world. So even like if I'm kind of walking around downtown, going to a shop, and there's a statue of Buddha, which often happens these days, like in the hair salon, in the, in the gift shop, there's a statue of Buddha in the restaurant. So for me then, that's like a special moment. It's like, okay, I'm going to connect with Buddha right now. And so we feel like there's a living presence. And not that it's inherently a living statue. It's not like that. We're not that crazy. But that in regarding, with respect, it's like we're inviting that enlightened energy into our life. We're paying respect to it. And in that way, we create a connection with Buddha. And that's part of our refuge. So as Buddhists, we go for refuge to Buddha, his teachings, and the community that kind of supports our practice, Sangha. So, refuge is kind of a practice of protection. And there's many things that we do in our life to, who do we go to protection for? If our life's being threatened, we seek protection from the police. If we have a disease, we seek protection from the doctor. But who's going to protect us at the end of our life and help us to take a fortunate rebirth? We ask the doctor to do that. Can you help me after I die? No. My job's over at that point. And police, nope, can't help you at that point. So we are looking for some protection because as Buddhists, we believe that our mind and our body are not the same thing. So when our body dies, it doesn't mean that our mind dies. Our mind continues, and we still will need protection. That's actually the most important time we need protection at that time of our death and after our death. So through developing that connection, like throughout our life, then we'll have that at the time of our death as well, which is an important aspect. So that's one thing about the, kind of a focus of our faith and developing that connection. Another purpose that the statues serve is they show us the path to enlightenment. So each one of these statues represents a real person who at one time, historically, was an actual person like us with problems and difficulties. And they practiced the stages of the Buddhist path and attained a state that's like transcended ordinary body, ordinary mind, attained a state of being that's free from suffering and free from having to take uncontrolled rebirth. So anyway, each one of these statues, in some way they actually show how they attained enlightenment. So like, for example, Avalokiteshvara over there, he's the Buddha of compassion. So we sometimes, have a particular practice where we're relating to Buddha Avalokiteshvara, the Buddha of compassion. Particularly one time that we do this is when we're, each month we have a ceremony that we pray for people who've recently died. And we connect people who have recently died with Avalokiteshvara. We visualize Avalokiteshvara on the crown of their heads. So the statues serve the purpose of kind of helping us to visualize and in that way connect and use the powers of our imagination to create karma, to create that connection. And, his different gestures reveal different things, like his hands coming together like this represents prostration, represents his respect for his spiritual guide. Also, his spiritual guide appears at the crown of his head. So those gestures show respect, that he followed a spiritual guide. The jewel and in like his hands there show the attainment of enlightenment. So it's like he attained enlightenment through following and having respect for his spiritual guide, following his teachings. And then the mala that he holds shows that his compassion has the power to release beings from suffering. The lotus shows that like from, that the lotus is kind of a symbol that like from the mud of ordinary life, from our difficulties, and just like the lotus, it arises from the swamp, from the mud, and becomes beautiful and pure. We can actually, if we have compassion, we actually can use the difficulties that we encounter in this world. We, don't shy away from looking at suffering, but actually if we look at suffering with compassion, we become like the lotus that, actually needs the mud to become that beautiful, pure flower. So without suffering, we won't attain enlightenment. It's with suffering coming together with compassion that we'll actually attain that enlightened state. So many of the statues represent actually kind of historical events in that person's life, like Buddha Shakyamuni here, when he, at his moment when he attained enlightenment, all of the like kind of maras or evil spirits of the world were trying to break his concentration. And he said, "The earth is my witness. I will not break my concentration until I attain enlightenment." And that pose then is now kind of like, kind of historically forever remembered. So some of them, represent the stories of how they attain enlightenment or the practices they emphasized. Tara as well has some stories. Some of these figures back here, like one of them, he's looking with his eyes like this, and that represents it like when he actually attained a realization of the nature of reality. It was so shocking. So it's like this face of surprise. So that's how he's kind of like, kind of historically remembered, like that moment was an important moment. So they represent everything like that about the person's life and their kind of attainment of realizations.
Well, I've collected various statues over time. So on the one hand, each of them kind of serves as like a memory for me of where and when I got that statue for my shrine, usually at one of the Kadampa meditation centers, because they're all over the place. So I've had the good fortune to go to Kadampa centers in various places and collect Buddha statues, and maybe at a, we do meditation retreats and festivals, and I'll pick up a statue at one of those. And so they remind me of those experiences, and then I have them on my shrine at home. And like I said, I could meditate anywhere, but to do it in front of a shrine with those Buddhas there just gives me that feeling of like, okay, I'm with my friends, I'm with my guides, I'm with Buddhas who have already accomplished perfectly happy minds, and that's what I'm trying to do. So being in their presence, physically as well as mentally, just really enhances my meditations.
Yeah.
And
So how I use statues in my life outside of the center, I actually have a shrine at home, and it's evolved over time. But you can have a simple shrine with just Buddha Shakyamuni, any image of Buddha Shakyamuni, and then Dharma. So you see the Dharma books above me, and then a stupa. And a stupa is the symbol of Buddha's mind, and the statue, the image, is Buddha's body, and the books are Buddha's speech. So his Dharma is his teaching. So with those simple things on your shrine, you have representations of Buddha's body, speech, and mind. And that's called a qualified shrine. So when I first started a shrine at home, it was very simple. Now it's grown, it's in my living room. And it's similar to this one, not this big, obviously. There are statues in all different sizes and kind of shapes. But my main image of Buddha Shakyamuni is brass, actually. It's an older one that was made in Tibet. And then around it I have smaller gold images. I would say that I have probably 10 different Buddhas on my shrine, and then I have images of another 5 or 6. They're not statues, but images. And I have water bowls. I do water offerings every morning. I have a picture of Geshe-la, Geshe Kelsang Gyatso, who's the founder of our tradition. He's at the picture at the top of the shrine there. And so it kind of grows and evolves over time. In our tradition, we have what we call empowerments. And these are special events where our teacher will teach us about a particular Buddha. Like we'll study, actually Avalokiteshvara. I went to an empowerment for Buddha Avalokiteshvara recently. And the teacher talks about that Buddha's life. So all of the Buddhas on the shrine were living beings. They were on the earth at some point. They were in this world at some point. So they'll have lives, they'll have stories. And so we learn about them and their special qualities. And then through the empowerment, then we go through a process of imagining us attaining their special qualities. And so we receive blessings. So as you go to every empowerment, many people, I have always then gotten a statue to take home, because now that person, that Buddha, is part of my life. Part of the empowerment process is, with each one, we imagine them at the crown of our head, descending to our heart, and they stay there.
No, the size of them doesn't really matter that much. We have like little statues and medium and big statues. It kind of depends on the size of the space. I mean, it is a bigger statue. There's a process of like filling statue, and in a ceremony when we actually kind of finish the statue and invite the Buddhas. So a bigger statue, one part that's great about having a big Buddha statue is that a lot of work has gone into it. I mean, you wouldn't believe actually how many people, our statues are actually cast at our main center in England. So just that was a tremendous amount of work to cast the statues. Then they get sanded, then they get put together, then they get painted. Hundreds of people have worked on that statue, volunteers with good intention and saying mantras and making prayers as they're working on that statue, with the intention that that statue is able to bring blessings to many, many people. And whenever somebody sees that statue, they receive a blessing, a special imprint on their minds that will kind of begin to awaken that person's Buddha nature. So a big statue has just a lot of power due to the intentions of the people working on it. And then the bigger the statue, the more mantras it has in it, the more precious objects it has in it. So all of those are blessed and create kind of a powerful presence.
Personally, I haven't. I have many of my good friends or members of my Sangha, but I have lots of friends who aren't and come to my home, and they're usually just real inquisitive. Like, ooh, they're beautiful, and they are, they're gold and jeweled and beautiful images. So I get a lot of, oh, who's this? And why, I get questions like, why are there so many? Which one is, what's this one's name? What's that one's name? And I just answer questions and enjoy the fact that they're getting, we call imprints. So every time you see a Buddha, you get an imprint, right? It's a blessing. Whether or not you're Buddhist, you get a blessing from the Buddhas. And so I'm just happy for my friends to gaze upon an image.
And in particular, I think of the laughing Buddhas that you see in people's gardens, or the Buddha with the big belly, just smiling and laughing, and that's not one that's represented in our statues in Kadampa Buddhism. But I can appreciate that if others relate to that image or to that Buddha, and that brings them joy, that has value. But I do think there's, some learning that we go through about which Buddhas are kind of in the forefront in our own tradition.
I don't know if I remember the first time I saw a Buddhist statue. I do remember when I was young, my mother had a thing for Buddhist statues and thought about getting some at the house for decoration because she liked them. I was raised Catholic, so there's a lot of Catholic objects around my home. But I would say when I was young, but I can't remember a precise time. When I first came to the center, to our center, Kadampa Center, I remember being very impacted when I walked into a presence where there was a big Buddha. There was a whole shrine of Buddhas that were very impressive. It was a very impactful experience.
I don't know if I remember the first time I've ever seen a Buddha statue, because I feel like I've seen them my whole life, but it wasn't until I understood something about Buddhism that I took real notice. Yeah, I truly can't remember the first time, but I do remember the first time I went to the Kadampa Meditation Center in LA. And there's a big shrine, lots of beautiful statues on the shrine, but the Buddha Shakyamuni, who's always in the middle of our shrines and always the biggest statue, really did stand out. And at the time, I hadn't developed the faith yet. I hadn't developed an understanding of who Buddha was, or what enlightenment meant.
I don't remember when I first time I saw a Buddha statue. Probably because it's, they're pretty common in our culture now. So I feel like I grew up knowing what that was. So it was never like a shocking moment first time I ever saw a statue. First time I started using one was when I first got into Buddhism, and I was reading the book Transform Your Life. And one of the first books that I was reading, it mentioned how to set up a little shrine in your house. So I set up a little shrine, had a little statue. I had, no, actually, someone gave me a statue. Yeah, the first time I kind of had a statue was, I used to work at a restaurant in Atlanta, and at Christmas we kind of did like the exchange thing, and we each had a different person on our work team to give to. And the person that gave something to me, and this was way before I was Buddhist. This was, well, at least 2 or 3 years before I actually met Buddhism. And he gave me a little Buddha statue, and he said, "You look like you'd like this." So, yeah, that was actually, someone gave me one. And, so that, maybe that little Buddha statue helped ripen my kind of potentials to be Buddhist. I don't know. So I had that little Buddha statue in my house for a little while. And, yeah, so then later, when I actually met Buddhism, then I kind of set up a little shrine in my house. And then, then you sit and you meditate in front of that, and it's just kind of a focus of your faith. And even though your eyes are closed, you kind of feel that you're in the presence of Buddha.